Hey everyone, tonight we're not stepping onto a sunny Caribbean deck with parrots and treasure maps. We're stepping into the cold, where hammocks swung like coffins in the wind, and men froze stiff before dawn. This was a world where socks were worth killing for. Cannonballs glowed red inside sleeping quarters, and drunken pirates smiled themselves to death in rum-soaked slumber. You won't hear of buried gold or daring sea battles here, only the creak of wet hammocks, the stench of moldy blankets stolen from nobles, and the silence of shipmates who never woke again. Survival wasn't about courage or glory. It was about pressing your body against strangers, wrapping yourself in a princess's gown, or clutching a heated iron ball while praying it didn't set you on fire. If you want the raw truth of how pirates actually lived and slept, hit like and subscribe. And in the comments, tell me, where are you watching from, and what's the harshest night you've ever endured? Now steady yourself, and follow me into the freezing nights of the open sea, where pirates slept like corpses, but woke to plunder another day. As the ship pitches and rolls beneath you, a profound chill begins to seep into your very bones. This cold is far more insidious than any storm's fury or an enemy's cannon. It's a persistent, creeping assailant that finds every crack in the ship's timber, every threadbare patch in your clothing, every exposed inch of skin. You can feel it reaching for you, an invisible hand pressing against your chest, trying to steal the warmth from within. This isn't the crisp, invigorating cold of a winter's day on land. This is the biting, ceaseless, wet cold of the open sea, a vast, indifferent expanse determined to claim you as its own. You might drift into a restless sleep, only to wake with aching joints and stiff muscles, as if your very marrow has begun to crystallize. Imagine the absolute stillness of a cold, moonless night out here. The only sounds are the groaning timbers of the ship, the relentless slap of waves against the hull, and perhaps the low moan of the wind whistling through the rigging. In this profound quiet, the cold becomes a silent executioner. It doesn't announce its presence with a roar or a flash. Instead, it whispers. It nudges. It gently persuades the life from your body. You hear hushed whispers among the crew, stories of men who simply didn't stir with the morning light, their faces etched with a final, peaceful expression, their bodies rigid as carved wood. The sea takes them back, not with a violent struggle, but with a slow, inescapable embrace of ice. You understand quickly that on these frigid waters, the cold is a far swifter and more pervasive killer than the heat of battle. A cannonball might tear through flesh. A cutlass might find its mark. But those are moments of explosive violence. The cold, however, works tirelessly through the long, dark hours, inching deeper into your core. It locks joints, freezes blood, and slowly, gently, puts an end to the struggling heart. It's a death that comes without alarm, a quiet ceasing of breath as the body succumbs. The rumors, the whispered truths you overhear, paint a grim picture, the easiest pirate death, someone murmurs in the dark, was freezing quietly in your hammock, never knowing it was your last breath. This chilling reality settles upon you, heavy as the damp night air, shaping every desperate choice you will make to see the next dawn. You become acutely aware of your own breath, misting in the frigid air, a fragile cloud that is your only visible proof of life. As you settle into your berth, you realize quickly that the hammock swinging precariously above the damp, cold planks of the deck is less a place of rest and more a grim, suspended sarcophagus. It's made of heavy canvas, once sturdy, but now thoroughly compromised by relentless sea spray, perpetual dampness, and ceaseless motion. You can feel the distinct texture of rot beneath your fingers. The fabric weakened, almost gelatinous in places. Every night, it's a gamble. The hammocks are perpetually soaked, not just from the ocean, but from the sweat of countless desperate bodies, spilled rum, and the pervasive moisture that clings to everything aboard a ship. This constant saturation accelerates their decay, transforming them into hanging coffins that creak and groan with a mournful sound as they swing with the ship's roll. Lying in one of these, you are immediately assaulted by the smells and textures of its true condition. Mold has taken root deep within the fibers, a dark, fuzzy carpet that grows in the perpetual gloom. You can feel its damp, earthy scent, mingling with the sharp, metallic tang of mildew and a host of other unidentifiable odors. And then there are the invisible, yet deeply felt, inhabitants, lice, and other unseen creatures that have made these sodden cloths their home. You feel the faint, irritating crawl across your skin, a constant reminder of the unsanitary conditions. But you are too exhausted, too chilled, to truly care. Dignity, comfort, these are luxuries long forgotten on the open sea. Your only objective is to survive until sunrise. And this rotting canvas, despite its vile state, is your only refuge from the unforgiving deck below. You clench your jaw, forcing yourself to ignore the pervasive stench, the feeling of dampness seeping into your clothes, and the subtle itching that begins to spread across your body. The dark humor that threads through the crew's conversations often centers on these very hammocks. You hear the gruff jokes, the resigned sighs. "This hammock stinks like a dead whale," one pirate might grumble as he pulls himself into his swaying bed. "But it's a damn sight warmer than the deck boards." You understand the grim truth of this sentiment. However foul, however infested, the hammock keeps you just a few precious inches above the icy planks, away from the direct, freezing drafts that sweep across the lower decks. Yet, the constant rot presents a terrifying nightly threat. You hear the stories, hushed and grim, of hammocks ripping in the dead of night, the sudden, sharp tear of canvas, followed by the sickening thud of a body hitting the wet, cold wood below. Sometimes, the man is merely bruised and shocked awake. Other times, in the morning's dim light, the hammock is found empty, a gaping tear in its bottom, and a body lies motionless on the deck, rigid and still, claimed by the cold shock of the fall. You find yourself holding your breath each time you shift, acutely aware of the fragile threads that hold you suspended, an unspoken fear of plummeting into the icy void below. As the biting cold pierces through your meager layers, you understand, with chilling clarity, that the individual struggle against the frigid sea is a losing battle. The only true defense, the most ancient and visceral form of warmth, is found in the collective heat of other human bodies. So, as night descends, you find yourself drawn into the communal huddle, a desperate, tangled pile of humanity, pressed together like sardines in a barrel. There is no privacy, no personal space, only the shared understanding that your survival depends on this intimate, often uncomfortable, proximity. You feel the rough woolen jerkin of the man beside you, the surprisingly soft texture of another's hair against your cheek, the rhythmic rise and fall of someone else's breathing just inches from your ear. The air around you, thick and heavy, is a potent cocktail of human existence. You inhale the pervasive stench of sweat, not the fresh kind, but the deep, ingrained odor of days without bathing, mixed with the acrid fumes of cheap rum that saturates so many of your shipmates. Intertwined with this are the earthy notes of rotting wool from damp clothing, and the ever-present metallic tang of seawater that permeates every fiber and surface. It's an overwhelming assault on your senses, a primal reminder of your shared predicament. Yet you find a strange comfort in it. Each breath you take is a shared breath, a tiny, fragile contribution to the collective warmth you are all desperately trying to preserve. This dense cloud of breath, fogging in the cold air, is a visible testament to your fragile, collective life. In this struggle for warmth, a brutal hierarchy emerges. Those unfortunate souls who find themselves on the periphery of the huddle, exposed to the direct bite of the wind and the unyielding chill of the ship's timbers, are often the first to succumb. You see them in the morning, their forms stiff, their faces serene in death. A stark contrast to the living, shivering mass they were once a part of. At dawn, with a grim efficiency, their frozen bodies are gently, or sometimes not so gently, pushed aside, making room for the living to carry on their weary tasks. A haunting quote, a raw whisper from a grizzled veteran, echoes in your mind. I was never closer to men in my life, but it was the only embrace that saved me. This forced intimacy, this desperate intertwining of limbs and breath, creates a living furnace, a small, radiating core of heat that fights back against the encroaching frost. You contribute your own body heat, your own exhaled warmth, into this shared effort. You sacrifice every shred of personal dignity, every instinct for solitude, for the simple, undeniable imperative of survival. In this tightly packed space, the cloud of your collective, stinking breath becomes a vital, life-sustaining fog, warming the air just enough to make it through another night. As the biting cold relentlessly attacks your extremities, you quickly learn that the true currency of survival isn't shimmering gold doubloons or glittering jewels, but something far more humble, far more essential: a dry pair of wool socks. You feel the insidious creeping chill in your toes, a numb ache that promises worse to come if not addressed. A single dry pair of socks, especially thick, sturdy wool ones, becomes a treasure beyond measure, a beacon of hope against the encroaching frostbite that can steal your digits, or worse, your very life. You see the longing in men's eyes when a fresh, dry pair is spotted, a gaze that speaks volumes about the desperation for warmth. The value placed on these simple garments is so immense that it sparks fierce disputes, often escalating into violent confrontations. You hear hushed tales of bitter arguments erupting into brawls, even fatal stabbings, all over the possession of a pair of wool socks. Men, hardened by the sea and battle, would fight with a ferocity usually reserved for defending a chest of gold, all to claim the fleeting comfort of dry foot protection. You understand this primal instinct, the fear of losing sensation, the threat of blackening toes and inevitable amputation that looms large in the minds of everyone on board. The desperation is palpable, a raw tension whenever a meager supply of dry cloth is brought forth. When actual socks are impossible to procure, creativity, born of sheer necessity, takes over. You witness men meticulously stuffing their worn, waterlogged shoes and boots with any available material that might offer a modicum of insulation. Straw, painstakingly gathered and dried, is twisted and packed in. Tattered rags, remnants of sails or old clothing, are carefully arranged, and in the most extreme cases, You might even see a man painstakingly shearing strands of hair from a willing, or sometimes unwilling, shipmate's head, to create a crude but potentially life-saving, insulating layer. The sheer ingenuity in the face of such privation is astonishing, a testament to the human will to survive against impossible odds. You feel the cold in your own feet, imagining the temporary, blessed relief such a desperate measure might bring. It's a stark illustration of priorities that in some of the official articles of piracy, the very documents outlining a pirate crew's rules and share of plunder, socks were specifically listed as valuable loot, alongside weapons and coins. This isn't just a quirky detail. It highlights the absolute, undeniable importance of warmth in their brutal existence. The dark humor among the crew often circled back to this grim reality. You might find him frozen stiff. A pirate might jest darkly. But by God, he'll still be clutching that dry pair of socks like it was his very soul. You realize that what the legends tell of shining gold is a far cry from the real, gritty truth. A pirate's true gold. The treasure that genuinely mattered on these frigid waters wasn't bright and gleaming. It reeked instead of damp wool, fear, and the sheer, desperate will to live. As the deep chill permeates every corner of the ship, you hear a new kind of clanking from the galley, a sound that promises a desperate, dangerous warmth. It's the unique resonance of heavy iron cannonballs being rolled into the roaring fire, coaxed by the cook into a blistering heat. The concept itself is terrifying in its simplicity, a high-stakes gamble against the relentless cold. You imagine the cannonballs, once instruments of destruction, now transformed into reluctant, temporary heaters. Their cold, dark surfaces slowly glowing a menacing cherry red as they absorb the intense heat from the crackling flames. The air around the galley becomes tinged with the metallic tang of superheated iron, a smell that is both comforting in its promise and alarming in its inherent danger. Once they reach a dangerous temperature, these glowing orbs are carefully, painstakingly, retrieved by means of tongs or heavy gloves. They are then wrapped in multiple layers of thick, damp rags, a crude insulation to protect against immediate burns, but also to prolong the release of their precious heat. You witness the tense moments as a pirate, with grim determination, tucks one of these scalding packages into his hammock, nestling it cautiously between his body and the thick canvas. The radiant warmth immediately begins to spread, a luxurious sensation against the biting cold, a temporary reprieve that makes the terrifying risk almost seem worth it. You feel the imagined warmth radiating through your own body, a deep, penetrating heat that promises to banish the shivers, even if just for a few precious hours. But the danger is always present, a silent, deadly partner to this ingenious solution. A single slip, a moment of clumsiness in the dark, swaying confines of the hammock, and the consequences can be catastrophic. The heated cannonball, if it escapes its protective rags, can inflict horrific burns, scorching flesh with agonizing speed. Worse still, it can ignite the very canvas of the hammock, sending flames licking through the sleeping quarters in an instant. A terrifying inferno on a wooden ship far from shore. You hear the hushed accounts of these tragedies, the chilling discoveries in the morning light, bodies found not frozen, but terribly charred, where a cannonball had rolled free, reducing a man and his makeshift bed to ash. Yet, despite these horrific risks, The pirates accept the potential for such a fiery death without hesitation. You understand their grim calculus: better to be burned, to suffer the excruciating agony of fire, than to succumb to the slow, agonizing surrender to the cold. The choice is not between safety and danger, but between two forms of inevitable demise. A pirate's weary voice might crack in the darkness, uttering a profound truth. "This iron saved us," he might whisper, "but by God, it roasted us alive if we weren't careful." You can almost see the shock image in your mind's eye: a partially burned corpse, still swinging gently in its hammock, a chilling testament to the desperate gamble taken and lost. This brutal paradox, this dance with both fire and ice, defines the relentless struggle for warmth. In the biting cold, when the shivers become a constant companion and your teeth chatter uncontrollably, the lure of rum is almost irresistible. You watch as men lift their crude mugs, their eyes shining with a desperate hope, convinced that the fiery liquid will provide the warmth their bodies so desperately crave. It floods your senses with a burning sensation down your throat, spreading through your chest, creating a powerful, deceptive illusion of heat. For a fleeting moment, a glorious warmth blossoms within you, dulling the incessant ache of the cold, softening the edges of discomfort, wrapping you in a false comfort. You can feel the temporary euphoria, the numbing bliss that makes you forget the damp, the chill, the grim reality of your surroundings. But this warmth, you learn quickly, is a treacherous lie. It's a cruel deception that opens the door to a far more insidious and quiet death. The rum, while initially making you feel warmer, actually causes your blood vessels to dilate, drawing precious heat from your core to the surface of your skin, where it rapidly dissipates into the frigid air. You see the tragic pattern unfold again and again: men seeking solace and warmth in the bottom of a bottle, drink themselves into a stupor, their bodies rendered helpless against the encroaching cold. They pass out, a peaceful, drunken slumber descending upon them, unaware that the very comfort they sought is leading them to their end. In their rum-soaked sleep, their bodies simply give up, quietly, without a struggle, without. Dawn reveals the horrifying toll of this deception. You watch, with a heavy heart, as bodies are carefully, or sometimes roughly, hauled from their hammocks, their limbs stiff and unyielding. The most chilling sight is their faces, frozen in a mask of death, often contorted into a grotesque semblance of a smile, a grim echo of the drunken contentment that preceded their demise. The rum had kissed them with warmth, then abandoned them to the icy grip of the sea. You hear the exasperated voices of the more experienced, the older salts, who witnessed this tragedy countless times. Wise captains, understanding the deadly nature of this false warmth, would often take measures to mitigate the danger. They might dilute the rum rations, forcing their crew to consume less alcohol, or insist on serving steaming hot tea or hearty, warming stews before bed, providing genuine sustenance and internal heat instead of a fleeting, fatal illusion. The dark humor surrounding these rum-induced deaths is particularly poignant. Rum was the traitor, you might hear someone mutter, shaking his head, kissing you warm, then leaving you dead. You understand the profound irony, the bitter truth that the very substance meant to provide comfort and escape often became the instrument of one's undoing. It was a cruel paradox, a false comfort leading to a very real death, a silent, smiling demise that haunted the dreams of those who survived. You learn to eye the rum with a new respect, a deeper understanding of its dual nature, a temporary balm for the soul, but a potential harbinger of eternal cold. In the desperate quest for warmth, the usual distinctions between luxury and utility, pride and practicality, completely dissolve. You witness a surreal transformation as the spoils of a raid, once intended for grand display or a noble's chambers, are reduced to filthy, yet life-saving, bedding. Imagine the vibrant colors and rich textures of a stolen Persian carpet, its intricate patterns now obscured by grime and sea salt, draped over a crude hammock, or the soft, flowing silk of a velvet gown, perhaps snatched from a Spanish princess, now serving as a makeshift blanket, its delicate fabric stiff with dried spray and the sweat of countless nights. You might find yourself pulling a heavy, embroidered officer's coat, once crisp and authoritative, over your own shivering body, its brass buttons cold against your skin. The irony of the situation is almost comical, if not for the grim stakes. You watch, perhaps even participate, as hardened pirates, men known for their brutal masculinity, crawl into the voluminous skirts of a princess's dress, not out of any desire for adornment, but simply because the layers of silk and petticoats offer precious insulation. This is humiliation traded for warmth, pride sacrificed on the altar of survival. The notion of dignity, of maintaining appearances, completely evaporates in the face of the bone-chilling cold. You understand that in this world, a shred of silk, however delicate, is infinitely more valuable as a thermal layer than as an emblem of aristocratic finery. These once pristine luxury cloths quickly bear the scars of their new, ignoble purpose. You can feel the coarseness of the fabric, no longer soft, but stiffened with a grim tapestry of everyday pirate life. They become perpetually soaked, not just with the omnipresent seawater, but with the pungent stench of unwashed bodies, the metallic tang of dried blood from minor skirmishes or injuries, and the unmistakable, briny odor of fish guts from hurried meals. The beautiful patterns are stained and faded, the rich textures matted and rough. The sheer degradation of these once splendid items is a testament to the harsh realities of life at sea. Yet, even in this squalor, there's a dark humor. You overhear a gruff pirate, his face etched with weariness, deliver a dry, sarcastic observation. "Last night I slept in silk. It smelled like a slaughterhouse. But by God, it saved me." It's a testament to the perverse ingenuity and adaptability of these men. Even the captains, insulated by their somewhat more protected cabins, understood the power of these stolen riches. You might catch a glimpse into their quarters and see the walls lined with layers of plundered silks and tapestries, not for decorative purposes, but for practical insulation against the raw, penetrating cold. Thus, the glittering spoils of war, the symbols of wealth and power, were reduced to their most fundamental, desperate purpose rat nest bedding, vital and invaluable in the ceaseless battle against the frozen nights. As dusk gathers and the ship groans into the deepest part of the night, a particular ritual takes hold, a beacon of warmth and sustenance in the overwhelming cold. You find yourself drawn towards the galley, where a huge, blackened cauldron, perpetually simmering over a low fire, becomes the focal point of survival. The air around it is thick with the rich, savory aroma of a hearty stew, a smell that promises not just to fill your empty stomach, but to ignite a vital warmth deep within your core. It's a simple concoction, often made from salty, preserved meat. Perhaps a bit of whatever fresh catch was hauled aboard. Generously seasoned with pepper and other harsh spices to cut through the monotony and, crucially, to warm the mouth and throat. You join the huddled masses, a silent, expectant crowd of men, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, steam rising in ghostly plumes around them. Everyone jostles gently for a closer position, not just for the portion they hope to receive, but to simply inhale the precious heat emanating from the steaming pot. You feel the warmth of the steam on your face, a welcome balm against the chill, and the pungent, peppery aroma fills your nostrils, a comforting prelude to the meal. This isn't just about satisfying hunger. It's about stoking the internal furnace, providing the body with the fuel it desperately needs to generate its own heat and withstand the long, frozen hours of sleep. Each spoonful, thick and robust, feels like a deliberate act of defiance against the encroaching cold. The connection between hunger and death on these frigid seas is undeniable, a brutal truth learned through bitter experience. You understand that a starving body, devoid of caloric energy, is an easy target for the cold. It simply lacks the reserves to fight back. To maintain its core temperature, the cold, swift and merciless, claims the hungry first, their weakened bodies offering little resistance. Thus, this nightly stew, this midnight cauldron, becomes more than just a meal. It transforms into a lifeline, a crucial prelude to sleep. You chew slowly, savoring each bite, feeling the warmth spread through your limbs, a subtle but profound shift in your internal temperature. You overhear discussions among the crew, hushed conversations about the vital importance of rations. It's a known fact that extra provisions, particularly during the harsh winter months, often save more lives than the sharpest pistol or the most cunning navigation. Food, in its most basic form, becomes a weapon against the elements, a shield against the silent killer that stalks the night. A grizzled veteran might share a cynical, yet deeply truthful, piece of dark humor. The warmest embrace wasn't from a crewmate. He'd grumble, a faint smile playing on his lips, but from a greasy pot of stew. You feel the lingering warmth in your belly as you eventually make your way back to your hammock. A small but significant comfort that prepares you for another night of desperate sleep. A tangible hope that you will indeed wake to plunder another day. As you prepare for another night in your swaying hammock, you realize that true rest is a luxury you cannot afford. Bedtime on a pirate ship in the icy waters is less about drifting into peaceful slumber and more about engaging in a series of frantic, desperate rituals. A nightly battle to trick your body into survival. You witness and participate in the bizarre spectacle of men performing strange, almost tribal dances, their movements jerky and exaggerated in the confined space. They pump their arms, stomp their feet, or vigorously perform push-ups on the damp deck, their muscles screaming in protest, all in a desperate effort to generate a fleeting burst of body heat before they surrender to sleep. You feel your own heart pounding, blood rushing through your veins, a temporary inferno that you hope will last just long enough. Other, more subtle tricks are employed, born of ingenuity and sheer desperation. You might carefully heat a spoon over a flickering candle or a glowing ember from the galley. Then, with practiced precision, slip the warm metal beneath your hammock, hoping its tiny, localized heat will provide a temporary comfort to your freezing skin. It's a fleeting warmth, a fragile illusion, but one you cling to fiercely. You observe men meticulously dampen rags with their own spit, then wrap these moist cloths around their faces, and attempt to trap the precious warmth of their exhaled breath, creating a tiny, humid microclimate that might stave off the frostbite creeping into their noses and lips. More substantial, though no less dangerous, methods involve heated stones or small canvas bags filled with warm sand. You might spend precious moments by the galley fire, carefully heating a smooth stone. Then, after wrapping it in several layers of cloth, tuck it strategically under your clothes, pressing it against your stomach or chest. The radiating warmth is a blessed relief, but you are acutely aware of the constant risk of it cooling too quickly, or worse, burning your skin if not properly insulated. Each of these small actions is a prayer, a desperate plea for another night's survival, a testament to the primal instinct to cling to life. And then, there are the tales of the truly damned. Acts of self-inflicted pain so profound they shock even the hardened pirate. You hear whispers of men who, in the grips of extreme cold and exhaustion, would deliberately cut their own skin, seeking the brief, burning sensation of warm blood flowing to the surface. A brutal, momentary distraction from the deeper, more pervasive chill. It was a desperate, almost unthinkable act. A final, horrifying gesture to feel something, anything, other than the numbing cold before collapsing into a precarious sleep. You realize, with a shudder, that a pirate's bedtime routine was far removed from any notion of rest. It was a grueling, torturous prelude, a last-ditch effort to cheat death itself, transforming the simple act of sleeping into an arduous, nightly battle. As the ship sails onward through the endless nights, you carry with you a new, profound understanding of the pirate's existence. A truth far removed from the romanticized tales of adventure and buried gold. You have walked among the ghostly crew, witnessed their desperate measures, and felt the insidious bite of the cold alongside them. You have seen the hammocks, not as beds, but as flimsy coffins suspended above the frigid deck. You have smelled the stench of humanity packed into living piles, felt the brutal necessity of shared body heat, and understood the grim calculus of who would survive and who would freeze. The true treasure was never gold, but a dry pair of wool socks, fought over with a ferocity that defied reason. You have seen the glowing menace of heated cannonballs, clutched close for warmth, a deadly gamble against fire and ice. And you remember the deceptive comfort of rum, a warm kiss that too often led to a final, frozen smile. The pirate's life, you now understand, was one steeped in a pervasive filth, a constant state of dampness and grime that gnawed at health and spirit. It was a life devoid of dignity, where humiliation was a small price to pay for the simple act of staying alive. Every breath was tainted with the stench of decay, of unwashed bodies, of fear. The omnipresent cold pressed in, a constant reminder of the fragile boundary between life and death. You feel the weight of this understanding settle upon you, a heavy cloak against the perpetual chill. Survival on these brutal seas did not belong to the strongest, the most courageous in battle, or the most skilled with a cutlass. It belonged, instead, to the dirtiest, the most desperate, the most cunning, those who could shed all pretense of civilization and embrace the raw, primal instincts necessary to endure. It was a battle fought not with swords or pistols, but with ingenuity, resilience, and an unwavering, brutal will to live. You recognize that the very act of sleeping, which should have been a restorative escape, was transformed into an act of sustained brutality, a constant engagement with the threat of death. The enduring image of the pirate as a ruthless monster, a figure of terror and unbridled savagery, takes on a new, deeper meaning. You see them not just as plunderers of ships, but as monsters of survival, forged in the crucible of unimaginable hardship. They were men who slept like corpses, their bodies locked in a nightly struggle against the elements. But who, against all odds, woke each morning to plunder another day? This golden legend of piracy, the thrilling tales of daring and fortune, hides a darker, colder truth. Their nights were not for rest, but for an unseen, relentless battle against death itself. A quiet, desperate testament to the sheer, terrifying power of the sea. And perhaps, somewhere in that vast, indifferent ocean, the echoes of their freezing nights still linger, carried on the wind until morning. You stand at the precipice of a dream, a young heart beating with the rhythm of distant waves, fueled by stories of endless horizons and glittering gold. You envision a life unfettered by mundane cares, a boundless freedom where the wind is your only master and the ocean your eternal companion. The tales whisper of daring escapades, of clever maneuvers, of sun-drenched islands where fortunes await discovery. Hidden beneath ancient palms, you see yourself, a figure of romance and courage, sword gleaming in the sun, navigating treacherous waters with a knowing smile, commanding respect and fear in equal measure. This is the pirate dream, vibrant and intoxicating, a beacon drawing you to the vast, mysterious expanse of the open sea. You picture the salt spray on your face as a refreshing kiss, the roar of the cannon as a triumphant symphony, and the camaraderie of your crew as an unbreakable bond of brotherhood, forged in shared adventure. Every sunset is a painter's masterpiece, every dawn a promise of new wonders, and every distant ship a potential canvas for your legend. You imagine grand feasts, rich spoils, and a life lived on your own terms, far from the stifling grip of society's rules. This dream is a powerful siren song, luring you with its promise of a glorious escape, a chance to etch your name into the very fabric of maritime lore. But as you step onto the weathered planks of a pirate ship, the dream begins to ripple, then warp, dissolving into a harsh, undeniable reality. The romantic images, so vivid in your mind's eye, begin to crumble like ancient parchment under the brutal glare of the sun. The freedom you craved quickly transforms into a different kind of captivity, a prisoner to the capricious whims of the ocean, the unforgiving demands of the ship, and the brutal necessities of survival. The glittering treasure you once imagined seems to vanish into the relentless expanse of the waves, replaced by the grim realities of daily existence. You are not a noble adventurer, a daring hero of the high seas, but a desperate outlaw, an outcast, driven to the fringes of society by circumstance or choice, now clinging to a life that offers little solace. The air, which you imagined fresh and invigorating, is instead thick with the acrid scent of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and the pervasive odor of damp wood and something undefinable, decaying. The constant rocking of the ship, once a comforting lullaby in your dreams, becomes a nauseating, relentless motion that unsettles your stomach and your very sense of balance. the sun, which promised warmth and golden hues, often brings only a scorching heat that dehydrates and exhausts you, baking the salt into your skin until it feels rough and parched. The thrill of adventure is swiftly overshadowed by a gnawing emptiness, a pervasive sense of suffering that clings to every moment, every breath. Your childhood dreams, those vibrant tapestries woven with threads of excitement and glory, begin to fray at the edges, then unravel completely, revealing the bleak, unforgiving canvas beneath. You find yourself adrift not just on the sea, but within a profound disillusionment, where the joy you sought has been replaced by a quiet, pervasive despair, a constant battle against the elements and against the dwindling hope within your own heart. This is the grim reality of a pirate's life, a stark and desolate world where every sunrise brings not a new adventure, but another day of arduous endurance. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky with muted hues of orange and gray, your stomach rumbles with a hollow ache. The thought of a meal, of sustenance, is a small beacon in the endless monotony of the day. But there is no lavish spread awaiting you, no fresh game or bountiful harvest from the land. Instead, your daily fare, your very anchor against starvation, consists of what has sustained sailors for centuries: salted beef and pork. This is not the tender, succulent meat you might recall from shoreside feasts. This is a relic, preserved through copious amounts of salt, stripped of moisture and vitality, rendered into something barely recognizable as food. You reach for a piece, your fingers brushing against its rigid, unyielding surface. It feels less like meat and more like a piece of hardened leather, tough and fibrous, almost petrified by the curing process. The scent is overwhelmingly salty, a sharp, almost stinging aroma that assaults your nostrils even before you bring it to your mouth. With a sigh that carries the weight of many such meals, you begin to chew. It is not a gentle act of mastication. It is a battle, a test of will and jaw strength. Your teeth meet resistance, sinking into the dense, sinewy mass only with considerable effort. You chew and chew for what feels like an eternity, the minutes stretching out as you slowly, painstakingly attempt to break down the fibrous strands. Your jaw muscles ache, a dull, persistent throb that spreads through your face. Each bite, each deliberate grind, is an exercise in endurance, a ritual born of necessity rather than pleasure. The texture is relentless, the taste a monotonous, intense saltiness that coats your tongue and the roof of your mouth. As you continue to chew, trying to render the leathery morsel into something swallowable, you feel the salt working its way through your system, systematically drawing out every drop of moisture. Your mouth becomes dry, then parched, a desperate thirst building with every labored swallow. You crave fresh water, a cool, sweet reprieve from the arid landscape within your own mouth. But such luxuries are rare and often rationed, replaced by the ever-present, less satisfying rum. Beyond the immediate discomfort of chewing and the insistent thirst, there is the insidious consequence of this tough, salty meat on your digestive system. It is hard to digest, a heavy, unyielding presence in your stomach that often leads to a dull, persistent pain, sometimes even sharp cramps. Your body struggles to break down these dense fibers, protesting with groans and discomfort. Eating, which should be a simple act of nourishment, a small comfort in a harsh world, becomes instead a painful necessity, a grim reminder of your precarious existence. It is a daily ritual that borders on torture rather than pleasure. a testament to the sheer desperation that defines life on the open sea. You push it down, knowing it is fuel, knowing it is survival, but deriving no joy, only the quiet, weary satisfaction of another day endured, another meager meal consumed. As the meager meal of salted meat leaves you more parched than satisfied, your hand instinctively reaches for the next staple, the omnipresent companion of every pirate's meal, hardtack. You know its characteristics intimately, having faced it day after day, week after week. It is a simple creation, a testament to the bare necessities of survival at sea, merely flour and water, combined and baked into solid, unforgiving bricks. These are not loaves of soft, fragrant bread, rising gently from the oven. They are compact, impenetrable blocks designed for one purpose: to last. You hold a piece in your hand, feeling its considerable weight, its rough, unyielding surface. It is so dense, so utterly devoid of moisture or softness, that to break it apart often requires a violent act. You might grip it firmly and smash it against the nearest hard surface, a table, a barrel, or even the solid deck plank beneath your feet, hoping to shatter it into manageable pieces. The sound is a dull, unyielding thud, followed by a shower of unforgiving crumbs and shards, each as hard as stone. You pick up a piece, already knowing what awaits your palate. There is no flavor to anticipate, no subtle notes of yeast or grain. It is a flat, uninspired taste of raw flour, a sensation that offers no comfort, no joy, only the stark reality of sustenance. It is pure, unadulterated blandness, a testament to a life stripped of even the simplest pleasures. The hardtack, in its stubborn durability, presents its own set of challenges beyond its unpalatability. If the ship encounters a patch of persistent dampness, if water seeps into the storage barrels, the hardtack, though resilient, will eventually succumb. It begins to soften, then to mold, developing a greenish-black fuzz that is not only unappetizing, but dangerous. Yet, if kept perfectly dry, away from the damp, another insidious threat emerges: weevils. These tiny beetles, drawn to the dry grain, burrow into the dense crackers, their presence often unseen until it is too late. You learn to recognize the telltale tiny holes, the almost imperceptible movement within the cracks. The crew has developed a grim ritual to cope with this unwelcome accompaniment. When the sun dips below the horizon, plunging the cramped quarters below deck into a murky gloom, you often find yourself eating your hardtack in the near-total darkness. It is a deliberate act, a way to maintain what little illusion of normalcy you can salvage. By eating in the dark, you are spared the sight of the countless weevils that often infest the biscuit. You can feel them, perhaps a faint crunch that isn't quite the hardtack itself. But your mind, weary from the day's toils, attempts to ignore it, to trick itself into believing it is merely rough texture. The knowledge that they are there, unseen, is a constant, unsettling companion to every meal. Hardtack is non-perishable in the sense that it won't rot quickly, but it is undeniably disgusting. A persistent reminder that even the most basic necessity of life can be reduced to a miserable, unwelcome chore, devoid of any comfort or delight. As the last sliver of daylight fades from the horizon, casting the waves in a deep, inky black, you retreat below deck, seeking the meager respite of what passes for quarters. But there is no sanctuary here, no quiet corner of your own. The ship, designed to carry cargo and guns, becomes a human sardine can, crammed with men packed in with an unforgiving efficiency. You are pressed against your shipmates, shoulder to shoulder, leg to leg, a relentless invasion of personal space that strips away any semblance of individuality. The air that greets you is not fresh, carrying the clean scent of the ocean, but a dense, suffocating blanket. It is stale, heavy with the pervasive odors of unwashed bodies, the lingering traces of sweat from a day of strenuous labor, and the cloying, musty smell of mildew that permeates every surface. Beneath it all, a sharp, ammoniac tang of urine, a constant, unpleasant presence. Your bed is not a soft mattress or even a comfortable hammock, but often a damp, moldy wooden floor, or perhaps a rough canvas hammock shared with the chilling dampness that seeps through the timbers. The wood beneath you is cold and unyielding, the constant rocking of the ship amplified by the close quarters, a ceaseless motion that makes true rest a difficult conquest. As you attempt to find a position of minimal discomfort, your limbs inevitably brush against others. Sometimes, it's the rough wool of a jacket, or the calloused hand of a sleeping mate. Other times, in the unsettling gloom, it is something far less human. A quick scurry, a fleeting brush against your arm or leg, and the sickening realization that a rat, emboldened by the darkness and the sheer proximity of warm bodies, has darted across your space. Or perhaps the coarse, itchy bristles of a shipmate's unwashed beard, pressed against your own face as the ship lurches and shifts. Night descends, but silence is a foreign concept in this confined space. The darkness is alive with the cacophony of human misery and desperate living. You hear the deep, guttural groans of men suffering from illness, their bodies racked with fever or pain, their sleep a fitful, restless battle. You distinguish the labored breathing, the occasional cough that rattles through the cramped space, and the soft, almost imperceptible whimpers of those lost in a nightmare or consumed by quiet suffering. Intermingled with these sounds of distress, other, more primal noises emerge. The low, urgent whispers, the rustling of clothes, the rhythmic creaking of hammocks, and the muffled sighs that suggest another desperate search for fleeting connection or release in the unforgiving darkness. In this close, unsegregated environment, the lines between sickness and intimacy blur, creating an atmosphere of raw, unvarnished human existence. Each night, as you try to surrender to sleep, is its own small hell. You lie there, acutely aware of every discomfort, every unsettling sound, every foul odor. The dampness seeps into your bones. The cold chills you even through your worn clothing. And the constant awareness of so many bodies around you, some suffering, some seeking fleeting solace, leaves you feeling exposed and vulnerable. Sleep, when it finally comes, is rarely deep or truly restorative, but a fragile, easily broken state, punctuated by the ship's movements, the cries of the sick, and the pervasive, inescapable reality of your cramped, filthy, and utterly joyless existence below deck. As the sun struggles to pierce the perpetually damp air below deck, you become acutely aware of the constant assault on your senses, a grim symphony of unpleasantness that defines your existence. There is no escape from it. These are the omnipresent companions of your pirate life. You lie in your hammock, or perhaps on a scratchy, rough blanket on the floor, and you hear it, the insistent, rhythmic drip, drip, drip from the deck above. It's not the soothing sound of rain, nor the clean spray of the ocean. Often, this water, filtering through the ancient, leaky timbers, is not the pure, life-giving liquid you crave. Instead, you know, with a sickening certainty, that it is often human waste, seeping down from above, mixing with the salt water and the grime. A foul, brackish mixture that lands on your clothes, your skin, sometimes even your face. It is a constant reminder of the lack of proper sanitation, the sheer, unavoidable filth of your environment. In the dim light, or perhaps felt in the oppressive darkness, you become hyper-aware of the other occupants of this floating prison. Diseased rats, fat and fearless, scurrying across the hammocks, their tiny claws a faint scratching sound that sends a shiver down your spine. You feel their fleeting weight as they dart across your limbs, sometimes even your face, in their endless search for scraps of food or simply new territory. They carry with them the unseen threat of plague and sickness, a constant, silent menace that adds another layer of fear to your already precarious existence. You are never truly alone, never truly free from the proximity of other bodies. In the cramped spaces, moving means inevitably brushing against your shipmates. The rough fabric of their tattered clothes, the clammy feel of unwashed skin, and the unsettling sensation of their dirty beards, coarse and matted, pressing against you in the confined quarters. The smell is a potent mix of body odor, stale sweat, and something indefinably foul, a scent that clings to everything and everyone. It is a constant, unavoidable intimacy born of desperation and lack of space, not of choice or affection. Everywhere you look, everywhere you touch, the ship bears the indelible marks of its harsh life. Mold, a greenish-black fuzz, has found a permanent home in every damp corner, on every surface. It is embedded into your clothing, a persistent, itchy presence that resists washing, becoming a part of the very fabric you wear. It works its way into your skin, a faint, lingering itch, a constant reminder of the damp, decaying environment. The very air you breathe carries the faint, earthy, yet metallic scent of rot, wood slowly yielding to the sea, food spoiling in the corners, the slow decay of everything around you. Every surface you touch is damp, slick with a perpetual moisture, or slimy with an unseen film of grime. The wood feels spongy in places, the ropes slippery, the air heavy with an oppressive, foul-smelling humidity. This is your daily reality. Basic living has been utterly transformed into a nightmarish existence, a constant struggle against pervasive filth, disease-carrying vermin, and the ceaseless assault on your senses. You learn to steel yourself, to numb your mind to the discomfort, to push back the rising tide of despair. But the memories, the smells, the sensations, they seep into your very being, a constant, unwelcome reminder of the true cost of life on a pirate ship. Even without the clang of steel or the roar of cannon fire, the ship harbors a far more insidious enemy, a silent killer that stalks the decks and lingers in the suffocating air below. Disease, a constant, pervasive threat, claims more lives than any cutlass or musket ball could ever hope to. You witness its slow, agonizing progression, sometimes in yourself, often in the faces of your shipmates, etched with the unmistakable signs of suffering. One of the most common and dreaded scourges of the sea is scurvy, a cruel and debilitating illness born not from infection, but from a profound and prolonged lack of something as simple as vitamin C. You watch as a robust sailor, once full of vigor, slowly succumbs. The initial signs are subtle, almost imperceptible, a creeping fatigue that settles deep into the bones, a pervasive weariness that no amount of rest can alleviate. Then, the body begins to betray itself. Small, purplish sores erupt on the skin, refusing to heal, often breaking open and weeping. Your gums begin to ache, then swell, becoming tender and inflamed. Bleeding at the slightest touch, the once firm teeth in your mouth begin to loosen, shifting painfully, eventually falling out with a sickening ease, leaving gaps and a constant phantom ache. Your muscles weaken, your joints swell, and every movement becomes a torturous ordeal. The vibrant spark in your eyes dulls, replaced by a hollow, defeated gaze without the vital citrus that could cure it. Scurvy is a slow, agonizing descent into utter debilitation, culminating in a quiet, inevitable death, often with a mind still keenly aware of its own body's decay. Beyond scurvy, countless other diseases fester and spread with terrifying speed in the cramped, unsanitary quarters. Common colds quickly escalate into severe fevers, their breath hot and ragged in the close air. Dysentery, with its debilitating stomach cramps and relentless diarrhea, dehydrates the body and saps all strength, leaving men weak and vulnerable. Fevers rage, shaking bodies in violent chills, then burning them with an unbearable heat. The proximity of so many men, packed together like cattle, with little ventilation and even less opportunity for cleanliness, turns every cough, every sneeze, every touch into a potential vector for contagion. A single sick man can quickly infect an entire crew, transforming the vessel into a floating chamber of illness. Poor hygiene is not just an inconvenience, it is a death sentence. The scarcity of fresh water makes washing a luxury, and often, only salt water is available, which merely chafes and irritates the skin. Clothes are rarely changed, bodies go unwashed for weeks or months, and the wounds, even minor scrapes from daily work, quickly become infected. Pus and inflammation are common sights. Festering wounds that could easily be treated on land, becoming life-threatening on the sea. The lack of proper medical care, of clean bandages, of even basic antiseptic, means that infection quickly takes hold, spreading through the body, turning a small cut into a fatal affliction. The stark reality is that death comes even without the glory of combat. It stalks the unlit passages below deck, whispers in the groans of the sick, and clings to the damp, moldy surfaces. Ships become literal plague chambers, adrift on the vast ocean, carrying their cargo of suffering and despair. Far more pirates succumb to the silent, invisible enemy of disease than to the violence of a cannonball or a sword fight. The sea, in its vastness, offered no escape from these microscopic killers, trapping men within their own failing bodies. A slow and agonizing end far from any romanticized battlefield. In a life defined by incessant hardship, pervasive filth, and the constant threat of disease, the human spirit, resilient as it may be, craves a respite, a momentary escape from the relentless grind. For many a pirate, that escape came in a bottle, a dark, potent liquid that promised a fleeting oblivion. Nearly every pirate, you observe, seems to be addicted to alcohol in some form, but none so much as to the ubiquitous rum. It becomes more than just a drink. It transforms into a daily ritual, a sacred observance in an otherwise godless existence. as the sun sets, casting long, weary shadows across the deck, or even when the day's labors feel too heavy to bear. The call for rum is almost primal. You see men line up, their eyes hollow with exhaustion, their bodies aching, their spirits bruised. For a brief moment, as the fiery liquid burns its way down your throat, there is a warmth, a sudden, fleeting rush that momentarily dulls the sharp edges of reality. Rum becomes a kind of medicine, a crude but effective anesthetic against the ceaseless pain, the cold that seeps into your bones during watch, the ache of overworked muscles, the gnawing despair of a life without hope. It numbs the mind, quieting the intrusive thoughts of home, of family, of what might have been, replacing them with a hazy, temporary euphoria. You watch as drunkenness becomes a pervasive state, an almost accepted condition among the crew. Men sway, stumble, their voices slurring, their laughter sometimes manic, sometimes utterly hollow. This intoxication, though acknowledged as a disease by those outside the pirate world, is ironically the only disease that pirates truly welcome. It is not something to be feared or fought, but embraced, for it offers a vital, if temporary, shield against the unbearable truths of their existence. It allows them to forget the stench of their quarters, the taste of their foul food, the festering sores on their bodies, and the ever-present shadow of death. Rum becomes central to pirate culture, woven into the very fabric of their daily lives and their lore. It is offered as a reward, used as a sedative, and consumed in vast quantities during celebrations, or what passes for them after a successful raid, or simply to mark the end of another day survived. The shared experience of drunkenness creates a distorted sense of camaraderie, a false bond forged in shared stupor. It is the cheapest, most accessible form of psychological relief, a potent elixir that promises to wash away the misery, even if only for a few short, muddled hours. Through the bottom of a rum bottle, you see men attempt to escape not just the physical discomfort, but the profound emotional and psychological toll of their lives. It is an escape from the gnawing fear, the constant threat of violence, the crushing boredom of long voyages, and the unbearable weight of regret. It is a surrender to intoxication, a desperate plea for forgetfulness, a temporary reprieve that only deepens the cycle of dependency. This liquid escape, though providing fleeting solace, ultimately binds them even tighter to a life they desperately wish to forget, perpetuating the very misery it promises to alleviate. Your mind, still clinging to the vivid imagery from distant shores and embellished tales, conjures visions of a pirate battle as a grand, theatrical spectacle. You imagine heroic duels on swaying decks, swords clashing with dramatic flair, daring pirates swinging from ropes with triumphant shouts, boarding enemy ships in a whirlwind of acrobatic grace and martial prowess, the roar of cannons, the splintering of wood, the brave stand of two opposing forces. These are the scenes that play out in your imagination, fueled by stories of courage and glory. You envision a dance of death, precise and exhilarating, where skill and bravado determine the victor. But as you sail the true pirate seas, these cinematic fantasies quickly dissipate like mist on a rising sun. The reality of pirate encounters, you soon learn, is far less glorious, far more pragmatic, and often remarkably anticlimactic. Most merchant ships, those plump, vulnerable prizes laden with goods, understand the futility of resistance. Their crews are not trained warriors, but sailors, merchants, and laborers. their primary concern being the safe delivery of their cargo, not a valiant, suicidal stand. You observe, with a quiet resignation, that when a pirate flag is unfurled, often accompanied by a warning shot across the bow, most merchant ships surrender almost instantly. There is no epic chase, no thunderous exchange of cannon fire, no dramatic boarding. Instead, the merchant captain, faced with overwhelming odds and the chilling reputation of pirates, simply strikes his colors, lowering his flag in a gesture of submission. The true weapon of the pirate is not necessarily the sword or the cannon, but terror itself, a reputation for brutality that often negates the need for actual combat. Because of this widespread compliance, those epic battles you imagined, brimming with daring feats and heroic clashes, are a rare occurrence, anomalies in the generally swift and unresisted acquisitions. The goal is plunder, achieved with minimal damage to the ship and minimal loss of life, both pirate and merchant, as a damaged ship or a depleted crew reduces the value of the prize. However, when resistance does arise, when a merchant captain, perhaps out of stubborn pride or a misguided sense of duty, chooses to fight, the reality that unfolds is starkly, chillingly brutal. There is no honor in these fights, no pretense of fair play. Pirates are not trained fighters in the conventional sense, not disciplined soldiers adhering to codes of engagement. They are, for the most part, desperate men, hardened by a brutal life, forming violent, unruly mobs driven by greed, rage, and the intoxicating smell of fear. Combat, when it happens, is not about glory or heroism. It is about terror. It is a swift, merciless application of overwhelming force, designed to break the will of the resistance as quickly and decisively as possible. The aim is to inflict maximum psychological damage, to instill a paralyzing fear that will ensure future surrenders are even swifter. When the rare decision is made to resist, when the merchant ship's defiance sparks a true confrontation, the sanitized, romanticized imagery of Hollywood battles shatters into 1,000 gruesome pieces. Forget the elegant swordplay and the theatrical swings from ropes. The reality of pirate combat is a visceral, horrifying experience, a raw eruption of violence devoid of rules, honor, or mercy. You are thrust into a maelstrom of desperate humanity, where survival is the only creed. The air fills not with heroic cries, but with the guttural shouts of men, the desperate pleas of the vanquished, and the sickening sounds of flesh meeting steel. You witness pistol shots, fired at close range, aimed not for a clean kill, but often for the gut, ensuring a slow, agonizing death, a gruesome message for anyone else considering resistance. The musket balls tear through clothing and flesh, leaving ragged, bleeding wounds that immediately become vectors for infection in this unsanitary world. Axes, heavy and unwieldy, are swung with brutal force, not for a precise decapitation, but to cleave through a shoulder, to sever a limb, to inflict maximum, debilitating trauma. The impact sends a bone-jarring shock through the victim, a terrifying sound that echoes in your ears. In the chaos, amidst the shouts and the screams, you glimpse horrors that would haunt your dreams. Eyes gouged out with a thumb, a desperate act of savagery in a no-holds-barred struggle for dominance. Intestines, bright and glistening, spilling from a disemboweled man, accidentally becoming entangled and wound around the very prow of the ship. A ghastly decoration for the advancing vessel. The decks become slick with blood, the pungent, coppery smell mingling with the salt spray and the stench of gunpowder. Limbs are torn, bodies are mutilated, and the screams of the wounded rise above the din, carrying a chilling message to anyone contemplating further resistance. When a man falls, be he pirate or merchant, there is no ceremony, no pause for reverence or respect. Corpses are simply tossed overboard, often still warm, with a casual splash that barely registers amidst the ongoing slaughter. They become just another piece of flotsam, swallowed by the indifferent waves, their lives ending with a nameless, unremarked finality. The scenes that unfold are bloody, grotesque, and utterly devoid of anything resembling the fictional duels of dashing rogues. There is no cunning, only brutality. There is no chivalry, only cold, hard ruthlessness. Pirates rely on fear as their primary weapon. Every act of violence, every gruesome death, is a deliberate statement, a horrifying display designed to break the morale of their opponents, to ensure a swift surrender, and to solidify their terrifying reputation. The violence is often gratuitous, designed not just to kill, but to shock, to traumatize, to teach a brutal lesson. The elegant, witty Jack Sparrow, with his nimble movements and charming quips, would not last a second against this harsh reality. He would be overwhelmed, outmatched, and quickly silenced by the raw, unfettered savagery that truly defined pirate combat. You witness the true face of battle, a face contorted by primal fear and unflinching brutality, leaving an indelible mark on your soul. As we gently return from this voyage into the shadowed depths of history, you are left with an undeniable truth, a stark counterpoint to the romantic fictions that have captivated imaginations for centuries. The life of a pirate, far from being a grand adventure, was an endless cycle of misery, punctuated by moments of extreme brutality and desperate endurance. You have tasted the rancid salt of the hardtack and the leathery bite of salted meat, felt the damp, moldy planks beneath your weary body, and breathed the stale, reeking air of cramped quarters. You have sensed the scurrying of rats in the darkness, inhaled the pervasive stench of unwashed bodies and lingering rot, and witnessed the ravages of disease, silently claiming lives far more effectively than any enemy cannon. The romantic legend of piracy, spun by poets and embellished by storytellers, proves to be pure fantasy, a glittering facade masking a truly grim existence. There was no true glory on these ships, only the desperate struggle for survival, a constant battle against the elements, against illness, and often against the very men you called shipmates. Every day was a slow, agonizing torture at sea, a relentless grind that stripped away joy, hope, and often sanity. This was not a life to be envied, not a path to riches and renown. It was misery incarnate, a profound and pervasive suffering that clung to every breath, every moment. The allure of gold and the promise of freedom were fleeting illusions, quickly overshadowed by the harsh realities of hunger, filth, and violence. A pirate's life was not a grand adventure, a daring escapade across the waves. It was, in its starkest truth, a silent, unspoken death wish, a desperate gamble with fate, where the odds were always stacked against you. And so, as you drift back to the present, let these quiet truths settle upon you. The pirate's life was a testament to human resilience. Yes, but also a stark reminder of the depths of human desperation and the grim realities that often lie beneath the most captivating myths. May your own journey tonight be one of peace and quiet reflection, far from the brutal, unromantic truths of the high seas.